Startups play a crucial role in advancing the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs) through their innovative solution that increasingly focus on sustainability. However, they face significant challenges in effectively assessing their contribution to the SDGs. Here are some ideas. Apply and identify SDG aligned opportunities. Incorporate sustainability into business strategy. Seek out partnerships. Embrace new technologies. Promote transparency and accountability. Based on the analysis of the startups and technologies advancing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we get to discover two handpicked SDGs enabling progress toward the SDG 8 for this evening. It's about promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. And the second SDG 17 is about strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnerships for sustainable development. Where this episode, we will take this dialogue coinciding with World Entrepreneurs Day. Yes, startups are the keys in the world's transition towards sustainable development. Good evening. You are tuning in the evening show with Stephen Poon. I'm your host for this episode 31 of Spotlight Dialogue series, which is the final one. Once again, in the virtual room with me are the regular team of the Special Interest Group in Circular Economy from Integrated Sustainability and Creative Strategies Research Cluster, acronym as ISUCS, also known as ISUCS, at Asia Pacific University of Technology and Innovation, APU. It's live on Facebook now and live on YouTube too. We have great staff and a little surprise. I'm very excited because we have plenty to share today. Before we get to all of that, let's start on the topic, startups and SDGs. Unveiling dynamic innovation matters for the greener and more inclusive economic development. Our guest today, an innovation, technology, entrepreneurship strategies, and ecosystem builder. During her career, she has advised a broad range of public and private sectors leaders, senior policymakers, government officials, international organizations, and other stakeholders globally across ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific, the European Union, Latin America, Africa, and Middle East, the OECD, the G7, and the G20. She is currently the head of startups and inclusion of the Jakarta-based Economic Research Institute of ASEAN and East Asia. She's a member of numerous expert groups and committees, including the World Economic Forum Expert Network, the SDG Task Force, and Startup 20, the G20 engagement group dedicated to innovation and entrepreneurship. She's the chair, the steering committee of the OECD, Entrepreneurship Education Collaboration Engagement, and an associate of the Edinburgh Futures Institute, EFI, a leading innovation center in the UK. Please welcome Dr. Giulia Ajmone Marsan.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Giulia. Good evening to you. Buenos Aires, Malaysia. Good evening to you in London. Buongiorno a te la Londres. How are you doing?
Actually, it's morning here, so you should have said good morning. But
yeah, that's
why
the reason I said buongiorno. That's the reason I said buongiorno a te la Londres. So how are you?
I mean, thank you very much. I'm absolutely okay. We need to reveal to our listeners that we just had some connection issue, and I hope that we won't have. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You know, well, I can see you are sitting in the sun, sunny day behind you. Beautiful day. A beautiful day over London, if I'm not mistaken. How's the weather today?
It's a beautiful day. Then, as you mentioned, is Entrepreneurship Day. So how can it be a bad day? I mean, for those of us looking at these issues, it's a wonderful day.
Yeah, exactly. Today, is a World Entrepreneurs Day, you know, in conjunction with the United Nations calendar. So I think we are celebrating for all the successful entrepreneurs behind the world. And of course, the things that we're going to look into that as well. So what is the situation over there at the moment in London? Of course, you are not really fully based in London. I know that your workplace is in Jakarta. So what is the situation over there? How's the entrepreneurship landscape over there? Comparatively, like in London, especially, I think you're doing some work in London, if I'm not mistaken, because according to what I understood, and also the place where you come, the place where you work, which is over Jakarta.
Yeah, so let me explain. I'm based in Jakarta in Indonesia, and now I primarily look at entrepreneurship and innovation dynamics in Asia. But you know, as you very correctly mentioned when you were introducing me, I do a lot of work about entrepreneurship, startup, and inclusive and sustainable development. Actually, globally, I'm very much involved in this such of work at G20 level, and as you know, the UK is a member of the G20. But I think to refer to my affiliation to EFI, the Edinburgh Future Institute, this center is not based in London, it's based in Edinburgh in the UK. But what they are doing is very interesting because it's a new innovation center all about foresight, strategic direction of innovation and entrepreneurship that really wants to benefit the local city level ecosystem. So even additional cities outside London are incredibly dynamic nowadays here in the UK. And I mean, you mentioned London, but I think all of our listeners know about London because it's one of the big entrepreneurship and tech systems around the world. So it's a very well-known example.
And there's also many think tanks over there as well. So what I heard about this, and also I get to know some of the great, which is full-on research in entrepreneurship, and also great entrepreneurs from this area as well. Yeah, it is. You know. Okay. Thank you so much. Really delighted to see you. I know that you are a very busy woman. Oops. I think Giulia is having a little bit of connection problem. So, okay.
I'm here. We are.
Oh. Giulia, you're back. Stable, very important. So make sure that we're, sunny behind you. So make sure that we're all stable. Right. Giulia, let's kick off this little dialogue with you. We have so much to talk about. We have a little discussion, which is over the past few days, and also get to understand and how the ecosystem, the issue, is going to be, and what can we take into that as well. What are the things that need to be done and tackle along the way. So I'm going to set the scene in order to get you into the which is this horizon easily. In the process of the current transformation from high speed to high quality development, the role of green innovation has gradually begun to receive attention. Also, the study found that green innovation significantly reduces the green economy efficiency of enterprises. In the case of insufficient protection of innovation achievement, limited knowledge and technology accumulation, and the absence of the enterprise engagement in heavily polluting production and operation activities, the negative impact of the green innovation of their green economy efficiency is more significant. Moreover, first, upgraded production processes. Second, a high degree of the freedom technology selection. And the third, high market competition can help alleviate the negative impact of the green innovation on enterprises, green economic efficiency. And when these three conditions are simultaneously met, green innovation significantly promotes the green economic efficiency of enterprises. So let's begin with, in your definition, what is green growth and innovation in your context?
Okay, let me start. I mean, you covered a lot of topics. Let me try to unbundle and untangle some of these. Because you're asking me what is green growth, let me start with a very, very simple definition. So basically, when we talk about green growth, we typically refer to economic growth that somehow is environmentally sustainable. I mean, this is something that, many years ago, nobody was talking about. Now, every time you read an economic strategy, a policy document, somehow you find references to this concept. And the reason is very simple. I think now we have a lot of tangible examples of, how climate change is negatively impacting our lives, our societies, our communities, and also the economy, because it's becoming costly. In a lot of developing countries, indeed, I mean, this is an argument that resonates quite well, with policymakers. They are starting to realize that doing nothing, against climate change, against sustainability, can become extremely costly for their economies going forward. And therefore, this is a very, very good carrot to, promote action. At the same time, there's also a realization that, as you said it already very well, innovation and entrepreneurship are playing a fundamental role, in green growth and these developments. And this is something that I know that to many of us can appear obvious, but it was not so obvious just a while ago. Again, I mean, this is something that this realization has come to the region where I'm based and I primarily work, ASEAN, very, very clearly. In the post-pandemic phase, if you look at a lot of strategic documents in the region, they really refer to a more sustainable and inclusive development path post-pandemic. But it's actually a global trend. I mean, this is why even at G20 level, this issue of green growth is increasingly, getting, of course, traction, but it's also getting traction in relation to entrepreneurship and innovation. And I'm very pleased, to see this recognition. I mean, once again, startups and innovation, they can be the solution to many problems. Of course, not to all of them, but I think it's important to recognize that without startups, without new business model, without new way of doing entrepreneurship, it's very difficult to achieve, meaningful green growth.
All right, Giulia, why is green growth and innovation important for developing countries, especially nowadays?
So I go back to what I said. On one hand, it's very important because there's this realization that doing nothing, business as usual, continuing with the old models of economic growth can become extremely costly in the future. On the other hand, I mean, that's also because essentially we know it. I mean, if you look at Southeast Asia, including the city where I'm based, Jakarta, there are huge pollution problems. And this is something that is affecting the economy, it's affecting productivity, it's primarily affecting, the way people, live and interact. Jakarta is one of the most polluted cities in the world. Everybody is always monitoring the level of pollution in the air. So again, I mean, this is why it's basically becoming essential. And once again, I mean, it's also something that has direct economic impacts. Let me take once again the example of the city where I live. I mean, these huge, traffic jams, are making people much less productive. We do often organize online meetings, even if you're in the same city, just because, you cannot waste an entire afternoon or an entire morning just being stuck in the car. So we really need to look for new and different solutions, and new startups, new companies, they are the ones that are called, to participate in this transformation and give us this interesting solution together with many other actors of the innovation ecosystems. And I'm sure we're going to touch upon it very soon.
Okay, Giulia, in your many years of traveling, working around from Europe to Asian Pacific, which is ASEAN Asia Pacific region. So many places. So in your observation, how can developing economies foster green growth and innovation, especially the differences between the developing country and the developed country?
I think the main difference between developed and developing countries, I mean, a lot of challenges are absolutely the same. The difference is that typically, and let's say on average, innovation ecosystems in developing countries are less mature. Which basically means that, some pieces or some of the building blocks of this ecosystem are, either more poorly developed or less advanced. I'm currently working on a paper on innovation ecosystem across ASEAN, and where we are paying a lot of attention to sustainable development goals and, of course, green growth and sustainable transformation. And what we are seeing is that some elements are a bit weak. For instance, in many countries in ASEAN, universities, especially technology labs in universities, are not as high quality as they should be. And this is, of course, an obstacle for the development of the ecosystem. Why? Because often, especially tech-based startups and entrepreneurs, tech-based entrepreneurs, they really need to rely on, this, kind of mutual collaboration, these positive linkages between academia, some relevant academic teams, and their own companies. So, because there are still some weaknesses on average, of course, not everywhere, but on average in the academic sector, this is a missed opportunity, which basically means that startups in ASEAN and other developing countries, they need to do extra work, when they're working on their tech-based entrepreneurship model. It means that they need to reach out tech labs somewhere else, maybe abroad, people speaking different languages, people that are far away. So these are all things that are making, the journey of an entrepreneur in developing country more complicated. Another perhaps very, very clear example is also the one about funding. I mean, if you are an entrepreneur in an emerging market,
the key is actually funding,
you struggle much more than an entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley or, in London or some, leading hotspot of innovation globally to attract funding, because there's less money around and because investors might be more skeptical. So I'm now working on a report about agri-tech entrepreneurship in Asia, together with the FAO and Agriculture Organization of the UN, FAO. And one of the ecosystems we were looking at is Cambodia. And in Cambodia, especially young agri-tech entrepreneurs, they were saying it's a nightmare to attract investors because, they ask us so many questions about, the country. They are very successful, very highly skilled, but nevertheless, there are still biases that, make these people, these entrepreneurs, they need to work more to convince the investors that, their company, it will be successful, that, there are so many opportunities. So this is another example that I wanted to share with you.
Giulia, just only mentioned about Laos, actually, that's really interesting. If I'm not mistaken, you have done a lot of consultancy work and in the different places. Would you like to, I think the audience also eagerly wanted to know as well, and especially me, what are some of the examples or case study of green growth and innovation in the developing economies?
You can find a lot of resources out there. First of all, I need to do it. So please feel free to visit my own organization, www.eriaarea.org. You will find a lot of resources about, the green economy, the transition towards sustainable development. Lots of studies also related to, EV, electric vehicles, and more in general, technological innovations supporting the transformation. But of course, beyond my organization, there are lots of very, very famous organizations around working on this issue. We do a lot of collaboration with the Asian Development Bank. The Asian Development Bank is extremely active in this area, as are other development banks worldwide. Also, the Inter-American Development Bank in Latin America. The green transformation in Latin American countries is one of their key priorities. Also the World Bank is doing a lot of work, both in terms of financing and also doing research to cover and compare different ecosystems. So, you have plenty of choice because lots of people are currently working on this, very, very important global challenge, which is, as one of the key priorities, especially for younger consumer. Let me add, something that I should have added before, and this is something that is specific both to emerging economies and Southeast Asia more specifically. These are younger economies. The percentage of younger population is much higher than more matured economies, for instance, in North America or Europe or Northeast Asia, for that matter too. So we are seeing that at least in ASEAN, consumers in the cohort of Gen Z and millennial are becoming the largest share of consumers in these countries. And I think this is a very important trend. Demographics is a very important trend to keep in mind when we are discussing innovations for the green transformation and for the SDGs more in general, because a lot of analysis is telling us that these generations, they care more about the green transformation compared to older generations. Because of demographic patterns, there's a market to fill. So
but of course, there's a lot of emphasis as well. There's a lot of emphasis, a lot of consciousness spreading around. Of course, they are more. They are doing more than what we do in the past. Yeah. Okay, go on then, please. Okay, Giulia, can you hear me?
Hello. I think I lost you for a couple of seconds. Yeah.
No, it's okay. No, I was just mentioning because there's a lot of which is emphasis and a consciousness around nowadays. So that's the reason why the younger generation, they are doing better than what we used to be. That's what I just tried to clarify that. But nonetheless, okay, let's look at another context. Reflecting on the role of skills for a greener economy as the linking factor between innovation and equality is forward-looking task. How are we to make the transition towards a greener economy and exemplary strategy simultaneously addressing environmental and social inclusion goals?
So, this is again an issue. The issue of skills for innovation and entrepreneurship is something that is very important for innovation ecosystem in general. So, not just for the green transformation, but because you asked me about the green transformation, let's try to talk about this for a couple of minutes. And let me perhaps continue what I was saying, to respond to your previous question. I was talking about consumers. This is very important. You talked about education. So educating consumer is extremely important. Why? Because consumers are the one creating a demand. So there's this phrase called demand-driven innovation that sometimes you can find in reports discussing innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. So this is the first way. If you educate the consumers, then consumers, in a sense, will create the demand for greener innovations, greener products, and greener services. And once again, Southeast Asia is well positioned in this respect because of demographic patterns. But in addition to that, you already highlighted other elements that needs to be considered. One, and again, to go back to what I was mentioning before, it's certainly making sure to have strong research and learning organizations. And research organizations that are specifically focusing on green aspects. We need more research, and we need also more tech-based research to basically plant the seeds of the technological advancements of the future. And this is once again an area that is fundamental for innovation ecosystem, also with respect to collaboration between universities and larger corporations, but also between universities, larger corporations, and startups. We know that in many cases. Yeah.
I think you have mentioned about university, which is learning. So I think, in your point of view, what is the contribution of innovation, skills, and technical and policy in startup?
So again, it's fundamental. We know that most countries around the world are missing STEM graduates and people with this kind of technical background. STEM competencies are not enough. There's a lot of analysis showing that you need to complement STEM skills with, critical thinking, managerial skills, the ability to continue to learn. We know that technology is moving very fast, so we need to have transversal skills that allow us to be entrepreneurial, even if we are not startuppers, and enable us to continue to learn. So this is absolutely fundamental for innovation ecosystems. But what I was also trying to mention before, we know that often universities can be very important powerhouses for startups. There is this expression called, universities spin-offs or spin-outs, because sometimes researchers, especially working on some...
Oops, we lost Giulia again. It's not really stable at the moment. I hope Giulia is going to be back very soon. There she is, Giulia. We lost you in a few seconds, but never mind, stable again. Over to you, Giulia.
No, I mean, I was just emphasizing, the role of the important role that spin-out, academic spin-offs can actually play in innovation ecosystem for the green transformation, because typically these are, research-intensive, tech-based type of startups, which once again, if, in the realm of green technologies, can play a very, very important role. So it's another example of how, even if we are talking about entrepreneurship and startups, at the end, we cannot forget about the other elements of innovation ecosystems, because it's very difficult for an innovation ecosystem to become mature or, work very, very well if there are missing elements out of the picture.
Okay, Giulia, let's take along with this. How can digital activities be the key to competitive and inclusive growth?
So, I mean, digital is a strong and very important enabler of, innovation nowadays, innovation in general, and of course, also specifically. And I mean, I think it's very important to keep in mind that digital technologies can be used by innovators in very, very different ways. So I'm going to go back to the example of, our study on agri-tech entrepreneurship. And we know agri-tech is something that can absolutely be related to Sustainable Development Goals, including those goals related to the green transformation. And it is something that, by the way, countries in Southeast Asia are extremely interested in, and many other emerging economies around the world are, currently trying to develop their own ecosystems. Why I wanted to make this example? Because if you look at agri-tech, there are different examples of how innovative business models can use digital technologies, from very basic to very advanced. I was recently reading an article about agri-tech in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and there were some examples from Senegal about entrepreneurs that actually put together a platform to basically connect farmers that are using their mobile, through 4G and internet connections, and these platforms where they can exchange meteorological patterns or indications on how to make their crops more productive. So again, this is not an example of deep tech based entrepreneurship, but it shows you how technology can be very, very important, even for entrepreneurs that are very far away from a research lab or, artificial intelligence, for that matter, applications.
Okay, Giulia, let's move. Oh, sorry. I mean, just go on that, because I was thinking about looking another perspective from the policy making point of view. Okay, never mind. I just let you finish with the part which is you tried to tell me.
No, I mean, what I just wanted to finish, and I will be very brief, I promise. On the other hand of the spectrum, you have, lab research intense startups. Think about the ones about cultivated meat or alternative proteins, which, by the way, I mean, are very popular. There's a very mature ecosystem currently developing in Singapore, another country very close to where you're based. So I think it's very important to really look at this spectrum and understand that digital technologies are an important enabler. Sometimes, very basic type of entrepreneurship that can nevertheless be very, very important and transformational. In other cases, especially in more mature innovation ecosystem, it can be something extremely, cutting edge, research intense, R&D intense type of innovation.
Okay, Giulia, let's slightly switch a little bit more to work, which you're looking at the policy making. How can, what are the new approach what are the new approaches for strategic policy coordination for the digital economy?
So, I mean, I don't know if this can be called new approaches. So of course, I mean, the new approaches are the ones related to understanding on how to regulate, new and emerging technologies. But otherwise, I mean, what policymakers need to do is always try to understand, first of all, the different elements and the connections between the different players in the ecosystem. Let me stress once again the word connection, because this is extremely important. If the players are not connected in an effective way, at the end, I mean, you don't have an ecosystem that is working very well. So this is something that policymakers need to facilitate by developing, efficient regulation around intellectual property rights, tax, migration policy, talent attraction and retention, for instance, is also very important. Again, I talked already a lot about the universities, how they collaborate with the business sector, making sure that you have as much as possible a level playing field, which is so important by startups, because they need to have a regulation that is allowing them to experiment and also to grow and compete against more established players. So these are all very important elements for policymakers to consider, and they need to pay particularly attention on how these different elements can be conducive for the development of green innovations, because it's so important nowadays. I think that, because you mentioned digital, it's also very important for policymakers to understand both the very positive sides of digital, but also the threats about digital. I think that, I'm sure you have read, and most of our listeners are familiar with the concept, for instance, of ethical AI. This is a field that, is extremely innovative in terms of policymaking, both, at supranational levels, but also in individual countries, and also within ASEAN. Within Southeast Asia, there are lots of, new strategies and regulation that are currently being discussed. Once again, that's very important, because we know that there are negative sides related to discrimination, cyber harassment, cyber and so on and so forth, which is very, very, very important for policymakers to understand and keep into account. Because we are here to discuss about the green transformation, and this is something that perhaps we are starting to learn about it, but we don't know all of it. New technologies like artificial intelligence are very much data intensive, and this also has an impact on energy consumption. So this is also something that policymakers need to consider.
Yeah, exactly.
We tend to talk about AI and the new technologies as something that is going to revolutionize everything. But there are important constraints, including environmental ones, to keep into account. So I think we'll see much more, research and also perhaps policy actions going forward, because as AI, starts to get adopted, more mainstreams, of course, there will be environmental consideration to be discussed.
Okay, Giulia, you just mentioned about AI. So let's look at the innovation here. Innovation has emerged as a critical driver of sustainable development, with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is SDGs, providing a comprehensive framework to address the various dimensions like people, planet, prosperity, partnership, and peace of global challenges. As we are already at the midpoint of the Agenda 2030 program in ASEAN, with the global community striving to accelerate progress towards achieving the SDGs, and understanding of the role of innovation has become of paramount importance. Progress towards some SDGs lags seriously behind, especially in the low-income countries, where the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent crises have been particularly severe. So, Giulia, what is the economic structure in the field of entrepreneurship?
So, again, I'm very happy that you mentioned SDGs altogether. This is, I think it's a very important framework that has been actually spectacularly successful worldwide. Basically, everyone knows about SDGs, and they discuss about SDGs. And I know that we're here to discuss mostly and primarily the green transformation, but I think it's important to remember that a lot of startups nowadays, they want to make a contribution to the SDGs. by taking into account the green transformation and going beyond it. I mean, think about more inclusions of women and girls, especially in the digital transformation and ICT, where we know that there are still obstacles, and women and girls, unfortunately, are lagging behind. Think about, you mentioned peace. There are interesting, business models, including in the AI field, that want to try to become a channel for peace and prosperity and reconciliations. Or fight, these models that instead, can become, an exacerbating factor for conflict and discrimination. Or think about, we did some reports, for instance, looking at how digital technology specifically, can be available to include people with disability in labor markets and in societies. And what we have seen is that there are a number of startups in ASEAN that are, putting the inclusion of people with disability at the center of their business model, sometimes combining it with digital technologies. There is a startup in Thailand called Vulcan Coalition, and what they do, they're basically training people with disability to become very skilled data labelers and participate in the artificial intelligence revolution. So there are lots of examples coming from Southeast Asia, the region where we are based, and of course also elsewhere, that actually show that startups and entrepreneurship can really have a tangible contribution to all of the Sustainable Development Goals. Again, let me stress that I've just provided a positive argument. Of course, there are also startups and business models that, on the contrary, can exacerbate current SDG challenges and not be part of the solution. But overall, I think that the modern way to be a startup and an entrepreneur, especially younger cohorts, are very much interested in, combining their business model and becoming successful with, the SDG 2030 agenda. And
all right, Giulia.
This is really a global trend. I was mentioning the demographics in Southeast Asia, but this is definitely a global trend that we are seeing very well, for instance, at G20 level.
Okay, Giulia, in your observation, how is the role of innovation in relation to the SDG presented in the existing startup?
So, lots of the SDGs are challenges that we have been discussing for a very long time. But, if they're still there, it's because we have not found, solutions. Now, these challenges are extremely complex. So, of course, no single startup, or it's extremely unlikely that one single startup will find, develop innovations to tackle them. But this is why innovation is so important. We really need lots of people around the world to think about how to find a solution. And because these problems are so big, ultimately, if a successful, effective business model is built, the chances to become successful are pretty high. Once again, it's a collective effort. You talked about some of these frameworks. These frameworks also often highlight partnerships. The last of the SDG goals, goal number 17, is partnership for the goal. So it really highlights the fact that innovators, they need to collaborate with many other people to find solutions, including their own communities, society, and so on and so forth. But once again, let me just stress the fact that startups and entrepreneurs definitely have a very, very important role to play, because they are the ones, inventing things, finding new business model, new products, new services that then we can use. Let me be practical. Let me give you a practical example that is both related to SDGs, but also the post-pandemic phase. There's a emerging startup in Indonesia called Halodoc. And they had a good success during the pandemic because they were offering remote, like telemedicine and other remote healthcare solutions in times where people had to be at home. They were even, I think, developing services to deliver at home medicines that people, were in need of during the pandemic, where it was very difficult to, move outside, different houses, mobility was very restricted. And of course, because of the pandemic, this startup became very successful. The government of Indonesia got interested in their model because, they were really serving a need. And they were finding solutions to problems that were very tangible and real in specific times.
Okay, Giulia, we live in a time of rapid technological change. At the height of the push of digital transformation and the early stages of Industry 4.0 revolution. These technological waves have great potential to help the global community to recover post-COVID-19 and bring about the transformation needed to achieve the SDGs, reduce poverty, tackle climate change, and put the world on a sustainable path. These also offer an opportunity for developing countries like ASEAN to catch up technologically and narrow global divides. Critical areas for the innovation in the new technological revolution are renewable energy technologies and frontier technologies for sustainable production and consumption. Innovation in these areas could help diversify economies and create startups while protecting the planet. In your point of view, what should Southeast Asia countries do take advantage of this opportunity?
So, I mean, Southeast Asian countries, I like this question. I mean, it's something that I've been working on for a while. So this question is absolutely crucial for Southeast Asia. And let me tell you why. Essentially, I mean, a lot of ASEAN countries are getting to the stage of development where to continue to grow, especially to continue to grow sustainably in the long term, they need to transition towards knowledge-based economies. And, to transition towards knowledge-based economy, you need to put at the core innovation, building innovation ecosystems, both in individual countries, but also in ASEAN as a whole. So this, I think, I mean, of course, I'm biased because I'm an innovation economist, but I think that building and promoting innovation ecosystems in the region is one of the really, key top priorities for the policymakers of ASEAN. Again, I mean, I know that there has been a lot of focus of ASEAN on trade integration. That's, of course, very, very important. But at the same time, I think that ASEAN really needs to build, their own domestic innovation ecosystems, for the prosperity of the current and future generations, and their own societal and also economic development trajectory. So that's extremely important. To do so, once again, I mean, they really need to think about innovation as a phenomenon that is related to many, many different policy domains and also many different pieces of the ecosystem. Skills I can't, of course, speak about everything. Otherwise, I mean, you would keep listening to me for the next 3 hours. But I mean, you already mentioned
another setting. Don't worry about it. Okay, Giulia.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me just pick one. I mean, I think that again, we talk with a lot of entrepreneurs in the region, and many people, they highlight the issue of skills. So they say that unfortunately in ASEAN, skill development is an issue, but also talent attraction. So this is definitely an area where policymakers need to do something about. They need to strengthen education systems from primary to tertiary education. And also, in research that, follows education cycles, universities and learning systems. But they also need to think about how to attract talent from abroad. I mean, talent circulation is something that is absolutely an enabler of, innovation ecosystems. I'm going to tell you just, the most famous ecosystem for innovation around the world is Silicon Valley. If you look at, reports and analysis about the history of Silicon Valley, all of them highlight, the fundamental role that, inflow of talent from almost anywhere in the world played, in the creation of this very, very famous ecosystem. So let's not forget about talent and retention because it's absolutely important.
Giulia, in furtherance of the points you just made, how could the international community support developing countries like ASEAN in this regard?
That's I mean, an easy answer. I mean, again, it's a very complex question. So you always need to look at different types of interactions among different players. But the issue of partnership is really, really important. And this is something that, again, I mean, we are really working on at G20 level. There's a new group of the G20 that is called Startup 20. It was launched by India, so a big emerging country. And it was launched by India following some work that Indonesia did under G20. So you see that some big emerging economies globally are actually taking the lead to put on the international agenda the issue of startups and entrepreneurship. And a lot of the recommendations of the work of this G20 group was about international partnerships and connections. Once again, now we have the technology. We learn how to work remotely. During COVID, I think your webinar series, in a sense, is a very good testament of it. But I mean, I think it's very, very important to make sure that, again, there are successful partnerships, sometimes global partnerships, as much as possible, to promote this kind of exchanges and flows of innovators across different locations. And to some extent, what is also happening is that already a lot of emerging countries are looking at other emerging countries because market conditions can be very similar. If we take another interesting tech area, the fintech sphere, this is an area where ASEAN, Southeast Asia, is definitely a leader. To some extent, fintech adoption in Southeast Asia is more advanced than in mature economies like Europe or North America. Think about e-wallets, e-money, different types of apps that people are using on a daily basis. And this is, of course, not exactly the same. Every innovation needs to be context and market specific, but it's a similar phenomenon to what is, for instance, happening in Brazil. Brazil is another leader globally and regionally in terms of fintech developments and innovations. Why are these regions leader? It's also because essentially there were big chunks of the population that were so-called, unbanked, people who did not access to financial services, the traditional ones. So some entrepreneurs, some innovators, they came up with the idea to develop services to serve this category of consumer that previously were outside the traditional banking sectors. So you see that there are a lot of very interesting innovations that are being developed in emerging markets in a different way to what has happened in the past, to more mature ecosystems. And that's because, the local conditions are different. And then there are some innovators, some entrepreneurs, they see the opportunity, they develop it. And, if they're lucky enough, they're good enough and lucky enough, then it's a tremendous success.
Okay, thank you, Giulia. I think this is a really enlightened point you just made. Okay, will the recovery of the pro-rich growth economy need a trickle-out push from the direct trickle-down innovation ecosystem?
If I manage to listen correctly about your questions, so innovation is very important, of course, also for the recovery. I mean, if you look at least in ASEAN, there were a lot of regional plans developed for the post-pandemic recovery. One is called, ASEAN Post-Pandemic Recovery Framework. And a lot of these plans is more than before, on the green transformation and SDGs at large. And they also recognize the importance of, digital technologies as an important enabler. I mean, on one hand, digital is bringing lots of innovations. On the other, is an enabler of innovations happening, in other more specific sectoral fields, whether it's fintech, agri-tech, health tech, femtech, which is, how technology is basically supporting healthcare and other women-related challenges. So there's much more attention to it. Then, of course, it's important that following attention, there are also concrete action plans and policies to support this transformation in the making. And I think, I already talked extensively about the different type of policies that should be put in place. But in a sense, I think that compared to pre-pandemic, there's now a lot of attention to these issues, much more than before.
Okay, Giulia, I think it's a time to take a look at the question posted by the audience. Okay, let's look at what is the first question. There's a couple of questions here. Let's look at the first question from the audience. How is digital transformation enabling more inclusive economic participation in Southeast Asia, particularly for marginalized group? This is from Lei Yang. Lei Yang is my student. Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Leyang, for asking these questions. So let me repackage a little bit some of the answers. I mean, or some of the things I discussed just before. So again, digital transformation can be a very important enabler. Having said that, we also need to always remember the possible negative aspects of digital transformation. I mean, the positive is, think about what I just said about the fintech revolution. Think about, the example I gave before about, the chat platforms for farmers in Senegal. Think also about, the example that I gave about digital technologies and including more people with disability in the economy. This is something that is happening holistically. I mean, I talked about disability, I talked about women, I talked about people that didn't have a bank account before, or farmers in sub-Saharan Africa. So it's happening already, and it's happening, to benefit a lot of different marginalized groups. Having said that, we also know that the digital transformation, especially in Southeast Asia, where the digital economy is growing so fast, is also bringing, an exacerbated digital divide. What is the digital divide? The digital divide refers to the fact that some groups in the population, they are benefiting tremendously from the digital transformation because they have the skills, because they have the digital infrastructure, the digital connection, and everything else that is needed. But then there are some other people that are completely, left behind, or they cannot participate in this transformation because maybe they live in a remote part of ASEAN where there is not even internet connection. And, this is also the case, for instance, of some parts of Indonesia, the place where I'm based. I mean, not today, but in general. I mean, Indonesia, you have some parts of Indonesia where, internet connection is fantastic. It's absolutely there for, every need. But then, especially in more, rural part of Indonesia, some remote islands, the picture is completely different. So the problem is that, there are some people that unfortunately cannot participate in this transformation, and therefore, the divide risks to become bigger and bigger. So this is something extremely important, and policymakers in the region need to think about it. Then, I also already touched upon possible negative consequences, misinformation, disinformation, cybersecurity threats, cyberbullying. So these are also important elements of the picture that we need to take into account because, of course, they are not contributing to, creating better societies and economies.
Okay, I think there's the same person asking another question, which is from Leyan, also, which is my student. He's asking, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia who want to focus on sustainable and inclusive innovation?
Yeah, and that's also, thank you for this question. I think that my advice would be look at the market opportunities. Because once again, at least until the end of 2030s, for the next 10 to 15 years, ASEAN will see a very positive and favorable demographic development with respect to innovation and entrepreneurship. And because of what I was referring to, there's more awareness in younger generations about SDGs and inclusive and sustainable development. I think, for wannabe entrepreneurs, there's really an opportunity to really fill in a niche of consumers that now, maybe they are not having at their disposal their preferred solution because either it's not green enough or perhaps, is not inclusive enough. So, there's really an opportunity for entrepreneurs to fill this niche and, become successful. Let me give you another example. And again, this is another example of how technology doesn't need to be necessarily really the most sophisticated type to be transformative. There's another startup from Cambodia called Grosserdel, founded by a female entrepreneur that we have been in touch with for our research. She was the first one to offer plastic-free grocery delivery in Cambodia. And especially during the pandemic, where everybody was ordering grocery at home, they became pretty successful because once again, they were offering this option that people could select that others were not.
Right. Giulia, exactly. The point you have just made. Okay, I can't believe our time is flying so fast, but I do have a couple more questions for you, but it's about sustainable development strategies for startups, which is based on whatever you said. I just come up with some of the which things I like to find out from you. How startups, which is sustainable development strategies for startup, maximizing efficiency from the inception to success. Okay, a sustainable startups are the engines of innovation, driving technological advancement and creating new business models that disrupt established industries. However, for startup to positively impact society, sustainability must be at the forefront of their development. So what is the role of the startup in sustainability?
So, I mean, we partly have already maybe discussed about it, but, startups are very important players in innovation ecosystems because are essentially, I mean, if we need to define a startup, it's essentially a new, young, dynamic, fast-growing firm. So typically, startups are characterized by agility and the fact that they are growing very fast. And, often they're associated with somehow, a business model that is relying on technology. Although, I mean, on this respect, the definition might vary. So because they're growing very fast, they are important players also because when successful, they create a lot of jobs. So that's also something that is very important for, labor markets and the renewal of our economies. So that's something that applies to startups in general. When we look at startups, for the green transformation or in the sustainable economy field, the important role they play is a kind of economic renewal. So they bring in creative destruction. They basically replace business models with something that is new, that's something that is greener, and somehow, I mean, they have the potential to have a very important transformative impact to the whole economy.
Why is having sustainable startup important?
So sustainable startups, again, are important because they can be part of the solution. So if we want, our economies to become greener economies, that essentially means two things. Either already established businesses, so the non-startup sector, are modifying their business model to become greener and adopt, greener and more sustainable practices, or we develop and invent something new. I mean, it's not just, about adopting the greener practices, but really creating something new from scratch. And this is something that, again, I mean, new innovative companies like startups have a fundamental role to develop. Because often, they are the disruptors, they are the new kids on the block that are creating new things. And when successful, I mean, they can grow very fast and become very, very transformative. Of course, you need both. I mean, in a well-functioning innovation ecosystem, you need the more established players that are typically larger corporations. And, I mean, they need to adopt greener solutions. But on the other hand, you also need these disruptors that, can really create something new that then, is potentially adopted very fast. So you definitely need these both category of players within the business sector to transform our economies, hopefully in a positive way.
Okay, another perspective to look into the point of lean startup, to explore the potential contribution and hindrances of the lean startup approach to society transitioning towards sustainability. The theoretical knowledge of the lean startup methodology and the experience of the user and advisor has been analyzed through the lens of the framework of strategic sustainable development, which is called FSSD, Framework for Strategic Sustainable Development. How might we best practice this FSSD approach in the lean startup?
So you refer to this framework, again, this is one of the interesting frameworks around basically aiming to support the green transformation and a more sustainable development. I think this framework is very interesting for a number of reasons. First, I like the fact that the framework is really focusing on different actors and players of the ecosystem. And I think also another aspect that I find interesting is the fact that it gives emphasis to complex systems. I mean, these challenges are extremely complex, as we were discussing at the beginning. So it's very important to recognize the fact that you need somehow to navigate and be able to govern and make the most of this complexity. So a complex system essentially is a system where there are a lot of players interacting simultaneously. Therefore, it's not just a linear trajectory where, from point A, you absolutely know how to get to point B. Everything is much more chaotic and complex in between. So I think this is very important to keep in mind, because the green transformation, and anyway, all the challenges contained, into the SDG approach, somehow, are related, to this idea of navigating and being able to understand, a complex systems where, there are a lot of different, dynamics that are interplaying. There are trade-offs. There are certain actors that are good for this, but for that. Actors that, they should collaborate, but the incentives are not so much in place for them to collaborate. There's collaboration, but there's also competition, and sometimes competition is preventing collaboration. So these are all, I think, very, very important elements for any framework that wants to address the sustainable transformation to keep in mind. And also for policymakers, because, policymaking need to reflect somehow, this complex system approach.
Okay, Giulia, in your advice, what specific impact activities or strategies do we use? Are we doing something you haven't seen before? How can we find a unique way of maximizing our impact?
So, okay, I think that this goes back to some extent. There could be many different ways to answer this question, but perhaps let me pick one in the interest of time. When you develop something extremely new, even if it's the best solution possible, you never know whether you're going to be successful, because you don't know whether ultimately users or customers are going to like and use this solution. Which is why, I think that the issue of, users, the skills of the user.
Oh, we lost Giulia again. Hopefully, Giulia is going to be back in a bit. Yeah, Giulia is having a really unstable connection over London at the moment. Yeah, according to her. But I think she's going to be okay. Right, we almost come to the end. But of course, we're going to see what is the last thing which Giulia want to put forward. Oh, there she is. Giulia. Like... we lost you a few seconds. Never mind. Come on, let's come to the end. So, what is the final thought?
It looked like the digital transformation didn't want me to address your final question.
Come on, Giulia, overcome it. Come on, Giulia, go on. You have any final thought you want to, what is the advice, actually? What is the advisement from the point I was just asking, which is, what is the, how can we find a unique way of maximizing our impact?
Yeah, so just to finalize very quickly, I don't know why you lost me, but I was talking about the importance of users and customers. You can have the best, green innovation, but if nobody's going to use it, then, it wouldn't go very far. So this is why it's very, very important that, users or potential customers, on one hand, they have the skills to adopt, good green technologies. And on the other hand, they are aware of the importance of these kind of business models, so that, when there is a new startups or a new solution that could be deployed, they are aware, and hopefully they're going to choose it.
Okay, Giulia. What can I say, Giulia? This is a great thank you so much for giving us your time today. Grazie mille. Okay, and for sharing all of your expertise. So well thought out and it gave us a lot to think about as well. It likely spurred some more questions. So it wouldn't surprise me if you and I maybe met out again and have another conversation around some of these follow-up questions that I'm sure will be coming our way. I believe everybody knows about that, which is Malaysia is a chairmanship, which is for ASEAN next year, 2025. I think we probably will meet again. Okay, Giulia. So awesome. Thank you so much once again, Giulia. I appreciate it. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Giulia. Right. Wow, that's a lot of notes taken from my side. Let's have a little bit of arrangement. Okay, let's put it together in order. So have a final thought, a little share here. Okay, more than ever before, we are seeing these drive for people to become their own boss, to live their best life as an entrepreneur. But with this rush to join the startup world, how can we make sure that all of this energy goes towards something positive? Those are the point I just made, which is when we started, startups can identify business opportunities that align with the SDG, such as developing sustainable products or services that address social and environmental challenges. Startup can incorporate sustainability into their business strategy from the outset, including setting sustainability goals and tracking their progress and aligning this goal with the SDGs. Startups can partner with other organizations and stakeholders, including nonprofits, governments, and other businesses to share knowledge and resources and developing innovative solutions that address the SDG, which is this is what I'm doing now, which is for some of the, which is a module I'm teaching at the moment. Startups can leverage new technologies such as blockchain and artificial intelligence, which is Giulia has just highlighted that, to develop sustainable solutions that can drive social and environmental progress. Startups can promote transparency and accountability by tracking and reporting on their sustainability performance and engaging with stakeholders to understand their impact and identify areas for improvement. By applying the SDG to our operation and business practices, startups can not only drive sustainability, but also build a strong brand reputation, attract customers who are committed to sustainability, and contribute to the broader global effort to achieve the SDGs. Right, my final quick thought and sharing here. Right, we come to an end. To close up the show this evening, yes, I just mentioned that this is the final podcast. Yes, our final show, sadly, from the past 3 years. It's been absolute blast doing this live cast on ISUCS APU for the past 3 years with an amazing team of student services and marketing behind me. Nicholas, thank you, the Ming Man, Nicole, Ming Ming, Jerry, and of course, Adeline. She was the one who started from the beginning, way back. And of course, with all of you watching wherever you are, it's been a privilege. It's been a pleasure. But as we begin 2024, with some of the things still currently ongoing, energy transition investment, moving forward with the NETR, launched in 2023, Malaysia National Energy Transition Roadmap, driving Malaysia's net zero aspiration through sustainable business growth. Second, increased EV adoption is something that we predict will continue substantially. The first phase of the e-invoicing mandate is all set for the business with turnover exceeding 1 million Malaysian ringgit. The next point is the initiative fulfills the government commitment under Budget 2024 to introduce outcome-based tax incentive designed to bolster the economy by catalyzing investment in high-growth, high-value sectors, fostering the creation of the new economy cluster, and promoting environmental sustainability. Make no mistake, Malaysia is positioning itself at the forefront of ASEAN thriving setup ecosystem with a focus on becoming a hub of the high-performing businesses in the region. Yes, Malaysia is holding ASEAN chairmanship in 2025 very soon. As part of the Malaysia Startup Ecosystem Roadmap, which is SUPER, SUPER, 2021 to 2030, the country has an ambitious goal to generate 5,000 startups, including 5 with unicorn status by 2025. The various government initiatives laid out as part of the Madani framework, SUPER 2021 to 2030, and the budget 2024 are a testament to the government commitment to bolstering the development of startup through investor-friendly policy and financial incentive, including grants, tax exemptions, and low-interest loans. Of course, the last point, the green transition takes on the greater significance around the world. Policymakers, industry players, and other stakeholders are changing the way they look at economic priorities. Malaysia, under the current Malaysian Prime Minister, has embarked its own path to sustainable transformation. Yes, all this is ongoing. It's coming to 2025. It's going to be a few years down the road. So we have so much to do. Great. Yes, that's the point. I have decided that it's the time for me to look for a new challenge. Tonight is my final episode for Spotlight Dialogue. Yes, I have decided to call it a day. To be clear, I'm so proud, so proud of what we have achieved on this live podcast on ISUCS APU, and I can't thank you all enough for tuning in and for your support and for your feedback. But as I say, upcoming new year, 2025, new plans. You can follow me on live threads, and of course, we'll give you updates on what's coming next for me. For now, from me, for one last time on ISUCS APU. Till then, take care and each other. Signing off, and good night.